When my girlfriend told me through tears that I had lost to her ex, I felt my heart shatter. I didn't wait for an explanation, I just started shoving clothes into my duffel bag while she sobbed in the doorway. "Please, Tyler, I didn't mean it like that," she begged, but I was too angry to listen. I thought we had built something real, yet here I was, apparently in second place. I walked into the bathroom to grab my toothbrush, ready to walk out for good. But as I reached for my things, my eyes landed on a positive pregnancy test and my world stopped. The silence between us broke only by the sound of zippers and sobbing. I yanked drawers open, grabbing shirts and jeans without even folding them. Maya kept trying to talk to me, her voice trembling, but I refused to look at her. Every word she spoke just made the anger burn hotter in my chest. I tossed the pile of clothes into my duffel bag with aggressive force. I needed to get out of this apartment immediately. I turned toward the hallway, bag in hand, but my path was blocked. Maya stood firmly in the bedroom doorway, tears streaming down her face. She reached out and grabbed my arm with a desperate grip, digging her fingers into my sleeve. She begged me to just stop and listen for 1 second. Her desperation was palpable, but my mind was already halfway out the door. I stared at her hand on my arm, waiting for her to let go. I jerked my arm back, breaking her hold on me without saying a word. The hurt in her eyes was obvious, but I pushed past her anyway. I marched down the short hall and turned into the bathroom. I needed my toiletries before I left for good. The bright lights of the bathroom felt harsh against my tired eyes. I opened the medicine cabinet and started grabbing my things, trying to ignore the sounds of Maya crying in the other room. My hand reached for the toothbrush holder near the sink. I grabbed the handle, ready to toss it into my kit, but something else caught my attention. Lying right there on the white countertop was a small, white plastic object. It looked out of place among the usual clutter of makeup and toothpaste. I froze mid-motion, my breath hitching in my throat. My anger momentarily paused as I focused entirely on the item sitting silently next to the soap dispenser. I leaned in closer to get a better look at the object. It was undeniably a pregnancy test. The little display window was clear as day against the plastic casing. 2 distinct pink lines stared back at me, unmoving and permanent. My mind raced to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. The anger that had fueled me seconds ago was replaced by a cold shock. Everything in the room seemed to go quiet as the reality set in. My fingers trembled slightly as I picked up the stick from the counter. The weight of it felt heavier than it actually was. I turned around slowly and walked back out into the hallway. Maya was still standing near the bedroom door, wiping her eyes. I stepped into the room, holding the test tightly in my hand. I needed to hear the truth directly from her. There was no way I could leave without addressing this first. I didn't say a word as I approached her. Instead, I simply lifted my hand and held the plastic stick up at eye level. Maya looked up, her eyes widening as she recognized what I was holding. The silence in the room grew heavy and suffocating. I waited for her to speak, to explain what was happening. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood there, demanding answers with just a look. Maya sniffled and used the back of her hand to wipe away her tears. She couldn't even meet my gaze. She looked down at the carpet, her shoulders hunching forward as if she were trying to hide. The shame radiated off her in waves. It seemed like confirmation of my worst fears. She wouldn't look at me, and that silence spoke volumes. I watched her struggle to find words, but none came out. Her silence was the final straw for my patience. I tossed the plastic test onto the unmade bed, watching it bounce on the duvet. I turned back to my duffel bag and grabbed the zipper. The metal sound was loud and harsh in the quiet room as I sealed the bag shut. I was done waiting for explanations that weren't coming. I grabbed the handles, my knuckles turning white from the grip. I hoisted the heavy bag onto my shoulder, feeling the strap dig into my muscle. The weight of it felt symbolic of the burden I was carrying. I didn't look back at Maya or the bed. I simply started walking toward the front door of the apartment. Every step felt heavy and final. I was ready to leave this life behind. The hallway seemed longer than usual as I made my way to the exit. Sudden movement to my left caught my eye. Maya sprinted past me, her bare feet slapping against the hardwood floor. Before I could reach the exit, she planted herself firmly against the closed wooden door. She spread her arms out wide, creating a human barrier. Her chest heaved with heavy breaths as she stared me down. There was a new determination in her eyes that hadn't been there moments ago. "You aren't leaving until you listen," she screamed, her voice cracking. She shouted that I had completely misunderstood what she said earlier. She insisted that losing to her ex wasn't about her feelings or cheating. Her words came out in a rush, desperate and loud. She looked frantic, terrified that I would push past her again. She begged me to give her a chance to explain the context properly. I reached for the doorknob, but I didn't turn it. Something in her voice made me pause. I stood there, hand hovering, while she started to speak rapidly. She explained that her ex-boyfriend was a cruel man who liked to play mind games. She told me about a specific conversation they had years ago. I kept my hand on the knob, ready to leave if this turned out to be another lie. Maya took a deep breath and finally dropped the bomb. She told me her ex had actually placed a bet on our relationship. He had wagered that I would react poorly to any life-changing news. He was convinced that I wasn't man enough to handle real pressure. She said the loss was about him winning that specific bet about my reaction. It wasn't about her going back to him, it was about his prediction coming true. She looked me straight in the eyes, pleading for me to believe her. Maya insisted that the comment I overheard was purely about that stupid bet. She swore there was no infidelity and no lingering feelings for him. It was just frustration that his cynical view of men was being proven right. She grabbed my free hand, squeezing it tight. She needed me to understand that this was about us, not him. The words hit me hard, making me reassess the situation. I looked down at the heavy bag still hanging off my shoulder. Then I looked back at the woman standing in front of me, tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked so small and vulnerable against the door. The anger I felt earlier began to dissipate, replaced by confusion. I realized I was acting exactly how someone had predicted I would. I took stock of my position in the hallway. Here I was, bags packed, literally seconds away from walking out the door. I had acted on impulse without asking a single question. I saw myself through her eyes for a moment. I looked like a man running away from responsibility. The realization was uncomfortable and sharp. I had been so ready to abandon everything based on a single sentence. Maya stopped talking and just leaned back against the wood. She had said her piece and now the ball was in my court. She looked exhausted, her energy spent from the crying and the shouting. She watched me closely, waiting to see if I would open the door or put the bag down. The hallway fell silent again. It was the moment of truth for our relationship. The tension in my shoulder was becoming unbearable. I slowly unhooked the strap and let the heavy bag slide down my arm. I lowered it until it hit the floor with a soft thud next to my feet. It felt like I was putting down a shield I didn't need anymore. I stood there, empty-handed, facing her. The immediate threat of me leaving was gone. I exhaled a long breath that I felt like I had been holding for 20 minutes. My gaze drifted past Maya, back into the bedroom. I could just barely see the pregnancy test lying on the bed cover where I had thrown it. That little plastic stick changed everything. It wasn't just about a bet or an ex anymore. It was about what that test represented for our future. Maya followed my gaze and then looked back at me. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke again. She told me the specific terms of her ex's prediction. He had said that I would abandon her the exact moment I found out she was pregnant. He claimed I was the type to run when things got real. That was why she had cried about losing to him. I felt a pit form in my stomach as her words sank in. I looked at my bag on the floor and then at the door. I admitted to her that I had almost proved that jerk completely right. I had been halfway out the door before we even had a conversation. Shame washed over me, replacing the anger. I had almost destroyed everything because of my own insecurity. I didn't want the bag between us anymore. I kicked the duffel aside, sending it sliding down the hallway. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. I wrapped my arms around Maya, pulling her into a tight, desperate hug. I buried my face in her hair, breathing in her scent. I needed her to know that I wasn't going anywhere. The misunderstanding was over. Maya melted into my embrace, her body shaking with relief. She buried her face in my chest, sobbing quietly. I could feel her tears soaking through my shirt. I rubbed her back in slow, soothing circles to calm her down. We stood there in the hallway, holding each other up. It felt like we had just survived a storm. I just held her, letting her know she was safe. I pulled back slightly to look into her tear-filled eyes. I promised her right then and there that I was staying. We walked back into the bedroom together, hand in hand. We both looked down at the positive test lying on the bed. It wasn't a symbol of fear anymore. It was the start of something new. I squeezed her hand, ready to face whatever came next for our family.